Hello and welcome to your first video and your first activist tool, the Teach-In. This week we're going to have a series of two videos that comprise the actual lecture content. This one is going to be about the historical and the methods of a teach-in, really. And the second one is going to be about translating that to a YouTube video that we're going to be doing, and also about some of the technical specifications and ways of doing that. So a teach-in is essentially an activity where, if you picture a traditional campus, you would interrupt the natural flow of what's going on in the campus, whether it's people's lunch break, whether it's a class time, and you would instead actually teach people about an important social issue that's not being recognized. So, and I think that it will make more sense once I start to go into the historical antecedents what exactly this tool is. So the first ever teach-in was in 1965. There was a group of University of Michigan professors who actually threatened to hold a teaching strike in protest against the escalation of the war in Vietnam, right? So 1965 is before many of the big movements, big parts of the women's rights movement, but right in the middle of civil rights, right in the middle of the escalation of Vietnam. So this group of professors who was concerned about the escalation of the war threatened to go on strike, and they were immediately condemned by the university, the state senate, the governor, everybody. And so instead of going on strike, which was sort of in some ways not the best tool for them, and that will be one of our activists' tools next week. But instead of the strike, they replaced their regular classes with the first ever teach-in on March 25th, 1965. They had hundreds of people come to learn about the war in Vietnam from a variety of professors who stayed well into the night, signed petitions, wore buttons, got a whole bunch of media attention, and really started a whole range of teach-ins at universities across the nation. And this is really the beginning of universities taking such a strong role in social action as they did in the 1960s. I'm going to show you a video of some footage from then. It's not the best quality footage, unfortunately, because it is recovered from 1965, so you'll have to bear with that. But I want to give you a flavor, and I want you to pay attention to what some of the best practices will be of a teach-in, because that's really the project of this lecture, is to come away with a list of best practices. So as you watch, please take notes. I recommend a double entry journal system where you take notes on what's actually happening on one side, and then on the other side or in the margins, you write down your opinions or little things that you notice. So we're going to go through that. Please keep your pen and paper and keep your eyes sharp.
Between 2,000 and 3,000 students of the faculty and the student body at the University of Michigan spent all night protesting the American policy in Vietnam. The demonstration was called a teach-in because the idea originated with a group of university professors. The consensus of those who taught in from 8 o'clock last evening until 7:30 this morning is simply that the United States must cease the escalation in Vietnam, negotiate a settlement, and/or pull out. Approximately 226 professors supported the protest. Among them was Dr. Eric Wolf. We discussed the demonstration with Dr. Wolf. Red China wants us to withdraw. Would you agree with that?
Undoubtedly.
Well, aren't we, in a sense, then, if we follow the dictates of your group, playing into the hands of Red China and the Viet Cong?
I don't see why this should be the case. Czechoslovakia fell to the communists, and it didn't mean that all of Western Europe went the same way. And I think if you have a weak position, you abandon it, and you can thereby strengthen many of the other countries that are around.
The professors at the University of Michigan hope that the teach-in will gain momentum. Tonight's demonstration was not a thing you could call overwhelming, but as one professor put it, 3,000 people demonstrating all night is not bad for a beginner. Bill Barnes, WXYZ, Ann Arbor, Michigan. Mom, do you endorse the administration's policy in South Vietnam wholeheartedly? And do you endorse bombing of Red China now? Wholeheartedly. And do you endorse bombing Vietnam, North Vietnam now? Not unless it is tactically necessary. The Vietnamese people are not guilty in this war. Does your group think that risking that a third world war would be worth it in Vietnam? No, I don't. But I don't think a third world war is going to be averted by chickening out in Vietnam.
So you saw the news article that showed you, the news piece that showed you the professor who's holding the protest, as well as some of the student counter-protesters. This is an interview with another one of the professors who is engaged in the teach-in.
Professor Gamson, why have you called for this work moratorium at the university?
Well, we hope by calling a work moratorium to indicate that the war in Vietnam intrudes on the daily lives of all Americans, and by holding a conference at the same time to look for viable alternatives to the current policy in Vietnam.
What are your objections to the present American policy in South Vietnam?
Well, we object to the unilateral escalation of the war in Vietnam, and we believe that the conditions exist at the moment for negotiations which would end the war in Vietnam.
What would occur during this work moratorium? Conferences, symposiums, or what?
Yes, there would be a one-day special conference on Vietnam with experts invited to speak about Vietnam and to discuss and look for alternatives to the policy that we're currently pursuing.
You criticize the present policy of the United States in South Vietnam, and you're calling for alternatives. Do you have any specific alternatives? Are you at this point in favor of pulling out?
Well, no, I don't think. There may be members of the group who would feel that way. We certainly are not advocating that in any sense as a solution to this.
Dr. Gamson, are you an expert on foreign affairs or politics or such?
Well, I have, my major area of interest is political sociology, and I'm interested in international relations. I'm not an expert on Southeast Asia.
Has the university endorsed your proposed work moratorium?
No, we haven't heard anything officially from the university, but this is not, and I should not be very clear that it's not in any way an official university action.
Do you think it should be?
Well, I don't think the university could become involved in a protest against American policy in Vietnam.
Do you expect the university to pay you? Do you expect to draw your salary for that day when you will not be teaching?
Well, we are considering various proposals along this line. I should emphasize that we feel that this action is our way of meeting our responsibilities to the students, to the university, and to the larger community.
Now, the very last piece that's included here is footage from the actual teach-in.
Any kind of a counter demonstration tonight, or is it simply
we're going to skip that part. Sorry, guys. And as you look at this, I want you to notice, first of all, how crowded the room is. So they did a good job of publicizing it in advance, making sure that everyone knew about it. But you'll also notice that while the room is made up of both men and women, only men are speaking at the podium. You'll also notice that we're talking about 1965 here. This is an all-white campus, an all-white school. African Americans cannot attend Michigan, University of Michigan at this time. So I want you to keep in mind not just what the best practices are, but also who gets left out by doing actions at the university, by all the other structures of our culture, whether it's sexism or racism, that are going to constrict the power of the people to actually completely change things. So you see a lot of other power dynamics going on. I'm going to cut this short, but I do want to scoot you through to the front because you'll notice that the women are running all the petition tables and handing out the buttons. That was their role in the anti-war movement, while the men did most of the speaking. In fact, one of the reasons that women said we need feminism is because it got so old doing all the typing and handing out all the buttons and not being able to speak on political issues. Now, so that aside, and we're going to go more into that later, I want you to think about some tips for an effective teach-in. First of all, plan a variety of activities. Changes in pace will keep your audience engaged. Okay, you notice they had multiple speakers. If you can, offer hands-on opportunities for your audience to learn about a social issue. So any kind of exercise that asks people to buddy up, that asks them to look at how they're affected by the current situation, ask them to think in a new way. Those are all great. And many of you who've been in good classes, good college classes, can think of some of these things. Incorporate other voices and expert opinions. Invite others to speak. One of the best things that you can do is be a voice of many people rather than just one. And then, of course, you offer opportunities for further action and involvement. So people always want to know, if you're teaching people about an important social issue, the next thing they're going to want to know is what they can do and how they can get involved. And you want to make sure that you take that energy and keep it going. Right? Because this is all about, in their case, it was all about building momentum against the Vietnam War. In your case, it might be about something else. But once the momentum builds, people will be interested in doing things, and you need to have an outlet for that. Now, I wanted to update it because I found a really, really great teach-in from the Toronto Women's City Alliance on the importance of gender in a city plan, which I had never thought of before, but I think really fits in to this idea of global women's studies and to our introduction. As you watch this video, once again, take those notes, write down your opinions, but keep that list of best practices in addition to the ones that I gave you. Start to make a list of the things that they did that were great that you think you can do. They do a really good job of hands-on activities. Okay, take a look.
Politicians, they surf trends, and in order to get noticed, we need to create a trend.
I'm here tonight to deepen my knowledge about the work that TWCA does, and also about the official plan in regards to women's status of equality in the city.
So TWCA was formed in 2004 by a diverse group of women really organizing against the growing invisibility of the voices of girls and women across the city.
I'm very interested in what women have to say about policy in general and the official plan in particular.
The urban and built environment issues I find are really important, and I don't think of them as women issues because I think of them as people issues.
I'm really passionate about women's voices being heard. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very passionate about strengthening women's voice in the policymaking process in the city.
Women, we are fighting inclusion. We play a very important role in the community. So it's high time women will have to come together. That's why I'm here, to enhance my knowledge and see how women can come together.
I want you to draw your route to get here. So from this morning, where did you go? Where did you start from? What type of transportation did you use? Did you walk? Did you bike? Did you take the subway, streetcar? And is there anything that would have made your journey easier?
I just rollerbladed to work. I don't know if that's very interesting. And I said that if the roads are in better repair certain areas, it would be safer for people who are walking as well as rollerblading or biking.
On my way home,
I'm sorry to cut that off, but I actually am capped at 15 minutes for my time to record. So I wanted to leave you with some parting thoughts. Make that list of best practices.